Hey Carrie, hello everybody, back at it again, and this time we are now on to part 2 of my character guide sort of thing with base characters, so let's go ahead and hop into that straight next section. Now at the very beginning of our Talisman journey, when we were just talking about the base concept of Talisman, and eventually all the expansions that would come to be, you remember our warrior. He's kind of been following us through most of the way, so he's going to be the first character that we start on. Now note, I am using the Cataclysm board, so things are obviously, if you haven't seen that video, going to look different, but all of the general areas and locations are still going to be the same. So, in the very beginning, you remember how I was saying with our character cards that we have strength here, craft here, and then towards the bottom we had start location and alignment, and all that sort of thing. So these are all the stats. Warrior's a strength of 4, craft of 2, is 1 fate, and 5 lives. And as you can see, he's only got 2 abilities. So the first character ability, you can see this, you may roll 2 dice in battle and use the highest attack roll to determine your attack score. So generally with the way that combat works, whether it's fighting one enemy or multiple enemies at a time, if you remember from the base game tutorial, it's basically you have your strength value or whatever your strength's currently at. You add that plus whatever modifiers, whether it be spells, potions, or weapons, and then you roll dice for both the enemy and yourself, and then you make your comparisons and that sort of thing. Being able to choose with 2 dice is definitely very useful because it allows you to have a higher chance of being able to roll higher, to being able to get those critical 6s or that sort of thing, to make battle easier. So as you could obviously tell from just that first ability alone, the warrior is obviously going to be a bit more combat based. He's going to be more of a battle type of character, a battle ready one, if that makes sense. So he's going to be the type of guy that can take on most enemies, even ones with a strength of 5 or 6, simply because you have that double chance, but also take into consideration the fact that you are indeed rolling 2 dice, so you have a 50-50 chance in total to roll higher. So you could also not end up rolling as high, so you got to definitely take that into consideration. And the fact that the warrior only has 1 fate, you got to be careful in how you spend it. Especially in the small picture with a lot of things that could go wrong. Things like failing to fight certain enemies or roll against spells and that sort of thing. Or as you start upgrading to the big picture of things like being able to take on the Reaper, being able to survive against the werewolf, or even being able to roll effectively on the Harbinger's chart, and being able to assign if that one starting fate is going to be a light fate or a dark fate, if you're going to be light bound or dark bound, because with odd number of fate, generally for characters in general, you're going to have to make that decision. There's no unbound decision to where you can have an even amount. It's just the way that the characters are designed. So with this second character ability, you may use 2 weapons at the same time. So normally, whenever you're battling, of course, you pick 1 weapon and then you do your fight. But being able to use 2 weapons is very, very good. If you have the city expansion and you're playing with the warrior, it's definitely a strong suit, because if you have the flail and the bow, as well as, say, the battle axe, which adds 40 your strength, then, because the bow isn't necessarily considered a weapon for battles, then you can spend a gold to roll a die to add your attack score, roll 2 dice for 1 flail, and then roll another die for the battle axe. And you can accumulate a huge amount of attack score. It'd be the same thing as if you had 2 flails. If you managed to save up your gold and buy 2 flails, then you can literally be rolling and using 4 dice at the same time to attack a player, or to attack a creature or anything, and essentially just obliterate everything in your path. Because who wouldn't want to get 4 6s and have an attack score of, just with even base alone, of having 24, 28 as your attack score? So yeah, the warrior definitely becomes a problem when you introduce the city expansion to him, because he has an assortment of weapons that he can use in different combinations. So the warrior's strength, in seeing just as how crazy he actually is as far as strength goes, then what exactly can we really do against him? Well, if you saw on the card, he only has a craft of 2. And do you remember how many characters from the previous part that we said have the ability to attack with craft? Exactly, it was literally 3 characters. We had the sorceress, the ghoul, and then the next character that we're going to get into later on with the wizard are 3 characters who can especially take out the warrior in the early game. And just as long as they're on the initiative against the warrior doesn't have much defenses psychically. So that's definitely where his weaknesses lie. So overall, I definitely think that if you're just trying to play base game Talisman, that the warrior's a pretty solid character. He's very battle heavy, but doesn't have much to do against spirits and that sort of thing. So it's definitely something that you want to keep into consideration, because as you're introducing more expansions with more spirit types, but also at the same time a chance of finding better weapons or certain weapon combinations, it's being able to take advantage of those different opportunities and just recognizing within the warrior himself what his strengths and weaknesses are. Sharing the same space as the warrior, he's a type of character who essentially just has a song that he wants to play for everyone who comes to the tavern, for jigs and hymns and all that sort of thing, to just kind of brighten up the mood. So the character that I'm in reference to is the Minstrel, which you can see here. He has strength of 2, craft of 4. He is a good character. He also starts in the tavern. He has a fate value of 5, again one of the highest fate counts, alongside the monk, priest, and a couple of others. And then he has the average life value of 4. So what exactly is the Minstrel's strengths and weaknesses go? Well, going off of these 3 character abilities, I'll just go through them one at a time. So we've got the animals and dragons will not attack you, although you may choose to attack them. Obviously, within that first ability in of itself, it already puts him at a pretty good advantage when it comes to playing with the dragon expansion, because if he can avoid dragons and essentially find ways to just move around them, if the spaces are starting to get crazy, literally dragons are showing up every other turn, being able to evade dragons is definitely good if you're not high enough, because as we already saw, having a strength of 2 and a craft of 4 already indicates that the craft route is where you want to go, because it's generally the higher stat. With most Talisman characters, whatever their base stats are, you kind of want to judge it either based off of their abilities or just where their stats are. Generally, higher craft-based characters, you want to go the craft route, or higher strength-based characters, you want to go strength. Now, the second character ability is if you do not attack an animal, you may attempt to charm it. To do so, roll 1 die. If you roll higher than the animal's strength, it joins you as a follower and adds its strength to yours in battle. You may only use 1 charmed animal per battle. So, in my personal experience, when it comes to the Minstrel and being able to tame animals, it's very similar in regards to how the ghoul brings back any trophies from the dead, and they essentially become raised followers. But the problem is, especially base game or otherwise, you're not really going to find that many animals to begin with, and not a lot of animals are really strong. Generally, animals have a strength range of somewhere around 2 to 4, which generally isn't great, and especially seeing as how you can only use one charmed animal per battle, it's still not very great. I guess the main caveat that makes him different, I don't want to use caveat because that's a poor choice of words, more so the plus side, is that with the Minstrel's charmed animal abilities, and just in the way that the text is read, you don't have to get rid of those charmed animals after you use them. It says you use them once per battle, but you can still keep those charmed animals to use for later battles, which is nice. But again, with that ability in mind, there's not a lot of strong animals or different animal types that have a huge amount of strength that will prove very useful to you. So with the last character ability of the Minstrel, it says you may take the maiden and princess from a character you land on. Thematically, and when it comes to just characterization of the characters, it completely makes sense. Minstrel's going to try to charm the maiden and the princess with his songs and his tunes and trying to get them to dance and that sort of thing. That just kind of seems like, character-wise, what the Minstrel would try to do. And the princess is a pretty solid follower, as well as the maiden, because the maiden offers you 2 additional craft to add. So, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just more so the fact that the probability of the maiden and the princess coming out is already low within itself with the base game, but it's significantly lower with more expansions that you add. So you can't really rely on either of those 2 coming out of the adventure deck and onto the board where they could be useful. Especially since, as you find and as you explore these other expansions, whether it's any of the corners of the highlands, the woodlands, the city, the dungeon, or even the dragon, or any of the other small box stuff that we covered, you're going to find a lot more interesting followers and items in all those other expansions than, say, the maiden and the princess. So overall, what do I think of the Minstrel? Well, obviously, as we were talking about him, he has a huge advantage in the dragon expansion because he can avoid dragons if too many dragons are spawning and there's chaos that's happening everywhere. And that's definitely something that he can do, which is a plus. But overall, his abilities kind of put him in like the middle tier, I'd say. Obviously higher than the elf and the monk. Maybe a bit higher than the ghoul, but kind of still below everybody else. Just to give you guys an idea of the bigger picture. As a master of the light and dark forces in the world of Talisman, the next character that I'm going to be going over in this part is the Druid. Now, I'm honestly going to say, the Druid is probably definitely on the higher tier when it comes to characters in this game. Just because of the overall fact that he's got a lot going for him. And I will definitely do agree that he is definitely one character that if you're looking for a particular type of playstyle that you want to go with, he is definitely one that you want. Going over his card here, we can see that the Druid has a strength of 2 and a craft of 4, which is, again, I guess more on the average side of things. He's got Fate of 4 and Life of 4, which is normal. And he also has 3 character abilities. So his first ability is that he begins the game with a spell, which makes sense. Druids are kind of the mages of the forest. They have their own magic to them already. And as you can probably already start to notice the pattern, a lot of characters inside of the base game are spellcasters, so they're generally going to have advantages inside of the craft realm, inside of casting spells and cycling through spells. As I get into more characters and more expansions down the road, that you're going to realize that a lot of these spellcasters have a lot of advantages to them. But the Druid in particular especially starts to thrive with this second character ability. You may change your alignment at will. At any given time, though, you can only be of one alignment. For example, if you are carrying the rune sword and you wish to pray at the chapel, you must ditch the rune sword. So, already within of itself, you can see that the chameleon-esque character ability that the Druid has to essentially shift between good, evil, and neutral is absolutely superb inside of the Sacred Pool expansion. Being whatever alignment that you need to be to take advantage of all of the alignments inside a Talisman is absolutely fantastic. Being able to find certain combinations with the good, the evil, and the neutral alignments is definitely something that you want to take advantage of. However, overall, as far as encompassing strategy with the Druid and just with the 3 alignments in general, when it comes to the objects and events and sort of thing, neutral characters are a lot more adept at carrying good and evil objects because their cards are more times than not going to say no evil character may possess the Holy Grail, or no good character can possess the Rune Sword, in which that case, for the base game, you would want to be a neutral character because that doesn't apply to you, so you can carry the Holy Grail and you can carry the Rune Sword at the exact same time. And that, of course, is the same with the Sacred Pool. A lot of the good objects are going to say no evil character may possess X object, or no good character may possess X object. And there's going to be a lot of neutral stuff that says no good or evil characters can carry this. So, being able to kind of switch and pick and choose your alignments with the Druid is definitely something that I encourage you to just sort of experiment with. There's no proper way of knowing which alignment is exactly perfect for you. So, that is definitely a character ability that the Druid has. When you start with the Druid, he's going to start inside of the forest, and then just to put it out there with already how good his changing his alignment ability is, he's already a neutral character from the get-go. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And now for this last character ability. Whenever you land on the woods, you may gain your full complement of spells according to your current craft. This is not craft value, it's whatever this plus whatever trophies and stuff that you added on, all of that together. And if you remember in our base game Talisman video, the way that craft equals spells is that you have to carry a minimum of 3 craft in order to carry 1 spell. When you get a 5 craft, you can carry 2 spells, and when you have 6 or more craft, you can carry 3 spells. So right now, with just base stats, with this craft of 4, the Druid can already carry 1 spell. So whenever he lands in the woodlands, as you start building your craft and you get to that 6 craft or more, every time you come to the forest, whether it be the 2 wood spaces that are on the base game outer region, whether it be the 1 wood space that's in the middle region, or it be any of the wood spaces that are inside of the woodland corner itself. Being able to replenish up to 3 spells and being able to cast and cycle through spells already puts you at a phenomenal advantage over most players. Because like I said, a lot of these characters inside of the base game are spellcasters, so being able to take advantage of certain spell combinations already puts most other physical players into shambles. So what do you really do against the Druid? Well, As you could probably see, most craft specialized characters have a weakness in strength. So the warrior is definitely a counterpoint to the druid as far as that regard goes. But he may also not be, as he already begins the game with a spell. So whatever that spell could have been, it's already secret to everybody else. So it leaves an element of uncertainty. So overall, I definitely think that in the base game characters, easily the druid is top 4. And I'll get into that later on why he isn't necessarily at the top spot and who the other 3 characters that I believe have their advantages over the druid.